The story begins in a place thick with the weight of history, an estate sale cluttered with forgotten heirlooms, a dimly lit antique shop where dust motes swirl in slanting sunlight, or perhaps the musty attic of a relative's old home, packed with relics of a past no one remembers. The air smells of aged wood and something else, something faintly metallic, like old coins or dried ink. The protagonist, maybe a skeptic, maybe someone too pragmatic for ghost stories, runs their fingers along the edges of furniture draped in yellowed sheets until they uncover it. A mirror. Not just any mirror. This one is imposing, taller than a person, its frame carved with intricate, unsettling designs. Vines that look more like grasping fingers, faces twisted in silent screams, symbols that might be decorative or might be a warning in a language no one speaks anymore. The glass is slightly warped, as if it's melted and reset over centuries, and when the protagonist touches it, the surface feels unnervingly warm, or maybe cold, they can't quite decide. The shopkeeper or the elderly relative hesitates when they ask about it. That old thing? It's been here forever. There's a pause, a flicker of something unreadable in their eyes. You don't want that one. But the protagonist laughs it off, or maybe they're drawn to it in a way they can't explain, a compulsion they'll regret later. The mirror is loaded into their car, hauled up creaking stairs, placed in a bedroom or hallway where it dominates the space, reflecting the room back in a way that feels wrong, like the angles are slightly skewed. That night, under the hum of a single bulb, the protagonist catches their reflection for the first time, and something is off. Their face looks gaunt in the glass, their eyes shadowed even though the light is bright. They lean closer, squinting, and for a heartbeat their reflection doesn't move with them. It stays still, watching. Then, as if catching itself, it snaps back into sync. The protagonist shakes their head, blaming exhaustion, but the seed is planted. The mirror isn't just old, it's waiting, and now it's home. The air in the attic was thick with the scent of mothballs and forgotten years as Emma pushed aside a yellowed wedding dress hanging from an old oak wardrobe. Sunlight bled weakly through a single cobwebbed window, casting long shadows across the sea of cardboard boxes and sheet-draped furniture. That's when she saw it. A sliver of something gleaming in the dimness, half hidden beneath a dust-laden tarp. Her fingers brushed away decades of grime, revealing an ornate full-length mirror that seemed to drink in the faint light rather than reflect it. The frame was blackened wood carved with disturbing precision, not the usual floral motifs of antique mirrors, but something far stranger. Twisting vines morphed into skeletal hands mid-design, their bony fingers curling around the edges of the glass. At each corner, hollow-eyed faces screamed silently, their mouths frozen in perfect awes of terror. Jesus, Emma muttered, wiping her suddenly damp palms on her jeans. The glass itself had an odd quality, like looking into a pool of mercury rather than normal silvered mirror. Her reflection wavered slightly, as if seen through heat haze, her features subtly distorted, her eyes appearing slightly too far apart, her smile stretching a fraction too wide. A floorboard creaked behind her. "You found it then," Mrs. Calloway said, making Emma jump. The elderly caretaker stood in the attic doorway, her knobby fingers worrying the cameo brooch at her throat. The usual warmth had drained from her voice. "It's unique," Emma managed, forcing a laugh that sounded too loud in the cramped space. "Victorian? Older?" Mrs. Calloway's milky eyes didn't quite meet Emma's in the glass. "Came with the house in 1892. The last tenant asked me to store it up here." She hesitated, then added in a voice gone suddenly sharp, "Leave it be, girl." Some things are better left covered. But even as the old woman shuffled back downstairs, Emma found herself reaching out again. The moment her fingertips made contact, a jolt like static electricity raced up her arm. The glass wasn't cold as she expected, but fever warm, almost pulsing beneath her touch. Her reflection blurred for an instant, just long enough for her to wonder if she'd seen its head tilt curiously before snapping back to normal. That night, after wrestling the mirror down to her bedroom, ignoring how the glass seemed to grow heavier with each step, Emma stood before it, brushing her hair. The amber glow of her bedside lamp should have cast warm tones across her reflection. Instead, the mirror showed her in muted grays, like an old photograph. She leaned closer, frowning at the way her pupils swallowed too much light, how her collarbones stood out like a starving woman's. A draft stirred the curtains, except the window was closed. The reflection's hair kept moving after Emma had stilled. She blinked. In that fraction of a second, the reflection's lips curled into a smile she hadn't made. Emma stumbled back, her pulse hammering in her throat. The reflection now matched her shocked expression perfectly. But as she watched, a single bead of something dark and viscous welled up from the corner of its eye, tracing a slow path down its cheek before disappearing. The scent of copper filled the room. Emma reached up to touch her own face. Her fingers came away clean. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock struck midnight. The mirror's surface rippled like disturbed water before settling into perfect stillness once more, showing nothing but an ordinary reflection in an ordinary room. Except now Emma couldn't shake the feeling that whenever she turned her back, the reflection stayed perfectly still, watching, waiting, breathing. The bedroom was too quiet. Emma told herself it was just the unfamiliar creaks of the old house settling around her as she prepared for bed. But the silence had weight to it, a thick, listening quality that made the click of her lamp switch sound unnaturally loud. The antique mirror loomed in the corner, its carved faces hidden in shadow, the glass now black as pooled ink in the dim light. She shouldn't have looked. Not again. Not after what she thought she saw earlier. But the mirror pulled. Turning slowly, she faced it. At first, nothing seemed amiss. Her tired reflection stared back. Messy hair, sleep-creased face, the same oversized band t-shirt she always wore to bed. Then she blinked. Her reflection didn't. Emma froze. A cold finger of dread traced her spine as she stared into her own wide eyes. Except they weren't quite hers anymore. The pupils were too large, swallowing the irises into black pits. The lips were parted just slightly, as if the reflection had been caught mid-breath while Emma herself held hers. She lifted a trembling hand. Her reflection moved a half-second too late, the motion sluggish, like something waking from deep sleep. Then it smiled. Not Emma's smile, something sharper, hungrier. The corners of its mouth stretched too far, revealing teeth that looked just a shade too pointed. Emma stumbled back with a gasp, her calves hitting the bed. The reflection's arm was still raised, fingers now splayed against the glass as if testing its surface. The pads of its fingers left faint smudges on the inside of the mirror. Impossible, because Emma hadn't touched it. Then, worst of all, it leaned. The reflection pressed forward until its nose nearly met the glass, its distorted face warping further in the curved surface. The bedroom behind it in the mirror wasn't her bedroom anymore. The walls stretched longer, the shadows deeper, the air swimming with dust motes that didn't exist in the real room. A sound escaped Emma's throat, half whimper, half scream. As if triggered by the noise, the reflection snapped back into perfect mimicry, mirroring her terrified expression with flawless precision. The room was silent again. Still. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps. Her knees threatened to buckle. She wanted to run, to throw a sheet over the damn thing, to wake up and convince herself this was just some stress-induced hallucination. But then, a single, deliberate tap from inside the mirror. The sound was soft, almost polite, like a greeting, like a promise. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat rigid in bed, her back pressed to the headboard, her eyes burning from the effort of staring at the mirror, watching, waiting for the moment her reflection decided to move again. And in the mirror's depths, something watched back. Emma's fingers trembled against the bathroom sink as she splashed cold water on her face. 3 days. 3 sleepless nights since the mirror had done whatever it had done. She straightened up, gripping the porcelain as her reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror stared back with familiar exhaustion. At least this reflection behaved properly. The walk back to her bedroom felt longer at night. The hallway floorboards groaned underfoot, each creak sounding like a warning. When she reached her door, she paused, hand hovering over the knob. An irrational certainty gripped her. Something had changed in the room while she was gone. She threw the door open. Moonlight streamed through the curtains, painting the antique mirror in liquid silver. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought she saw a figure standing before it, a dark silhouette of herself, head cocked at an unnatural angle. Then the shape dissolved into ordinary shadows. Emma exhaled shakily and crossed to her dresser, keeping her back resolutely to the mirror as she rummaged for sleep aids. The pills rattled in their bottle, absurdly loud in the quiet. When she turned, her reflection was already looking at her, not turning with her, not mirroring her motion, but waiting, watching, its head tilted in that same unnatural angle she'd glimpsed moments before. The pill bottle hit the floor with a clatter. This time, the reflection didn't snap back to normal. It held Emma's gaze with terrible patience, its features smoothing into something almost sympathetic. Its mouth moved, forming words Emma couldn't hear. Then it raised one hand and placed it against the glass. Not mimicking. Reaching. The surface rippled like disturbed water. Emma's breath came in short, panicked bursts. Every instinct screamed to run, but her legs refused to move. The reflection's fingers pressed harder, the tips turning white against the glass. A hairline crack appeared beneath its index finger. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck 3. The sound shattered the spell. Emma stumbled backward, her hip slamming into the dresser. The reflection's face twisted in what might have been frustration before. With visible effort, it lowered its hand and slowly, deliberately, returned to perfect mimicry. But the crack remained. And in the warped edges of the fractured glass, Emma could swear something dark and viscous was slowly welling up. She didn't sleep that night. She sat rigid in bed, her back pressed to the headboard, her eyes burning from the effort of staring at the mirror, watching, waiting for the moment her reflection decided to move again. And in the mirror's depths, something watched back, patient, hungry, and very, very close to breaking through. The crack in the mirror didn't heal. If anything, it grew, just a hair's breadth each day, spiderwebbing outward like veins beneath skin. Emma tried to ignore it. She draped a sheet over the mirror, then a blanket, then a heavy winter coat when the other coverings kept sliding off for no reason. But the whispers started anyway. At first, they were easy to dismiss, just the house settling, or the wind through old pipes. But then she began to hear words. Her name, spoken in her own voice but wrong, stretched too thin, like a recording played at half speed. Ma. She'd spin around, heart pounding, only to find the room empty. The whispers always came from behind her, from the direction of the covered mirror. Sometimes they mimicked her mother's voice, or her best friend's, or, worst of all, her own, but warped, as if something were learning how to speak by copying her. Then the reflections in other surfaces began changing. She'd catch a glimpse in her phone screen, her reflection smiling while she frowned. Her face in the microwave door would blink a second too late. One night, washing dishes, she looked down and saw the soapy water reflecting not her hands, but pale, grasping fingers reaching up toward hers. She jerked back, sending a glass shattering to the floor. When she looked again, the water showed only her own shaking hands, but the whispers grew louder. They started answering her. "Who's there?" she'd demand, voice cracking. "You know," the mirror would sigh back, the sheet over it fluttering despite the still air. Sleep became impossible. Dark circles deepened under her eyes. She caught herself staring at reflective surfaces for too long, waiting for the moment her reflection would move on its own again. Then, one sleepless night, she heard a new sound. A knock from inside the mirror. Not the glass, behind it. Like something was in there, trapped and wanted out. The crack in the mirror had become a living thing. Emma found herself tracing its jagged path each morning, her fingertips hovering just above the glass as the fissure branched out in new directions overnight. It pulsed faintly in the moonlight. Not a trick of the eyes, but a slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction, like breathing. The whispers began as sighs, barely audible exhalations that made the hairs on Emma's neck stand at attention. She'd spin around, certain someone stood behind her, only to find empty air, thick with the scent of old roses and wet earth. Then came the voices. Not echoes, but conversations just beyond her understanding, murmuring in languages that twisted unpleasantly in her ears. Sometimes they spoke in familiar tones, her mother's lilt, her professor's dry cadence, but the words were all wrong. "She's watching us, too." Her best friend's voice giggled from the bathroom mirror one morning, though Emma was home alone. "The glass tastes like blood," her own voice sighed from the darkened TV screen that night. Reflections stopped obeying natural laws. Her coffee mug showed her hand passing straight through solid ceramic. Car windows reflected her standing inches to the left of where she actually stood. The worst was the medicine cabinet. When she opened it, the mirror inside showed not the bathroom behind her, but an endless hallway of identical cabinets stretching into darkness. From deep within came wet, shuffling footsteps moving steadily closer. Emma stopped sleeping, started keeping all lights blazing through the night. The whispers grew bolder, now speaking in unison from every reflective surface when she entered a room. "Let us in. Let us out. Let us through." Then came the night she woke to fingernails dragging across her bedroom window. Not tree branches. The rhythm was too deliberate, spelling something in a language her skin understood, even if her mind didn't. When she turned on the light, her reflection in the black glass was already sitting up in bed, grinning wildly with ink-black eyes, mouth moving out of sync as the whispers coalesced into a single, hissing command. "Break it." The next morning, Emma found the first hairline fractures in her smartphone screen, her bathroom mirror, the toaster's reflective surface, all radiating from where her reflection's fingers had pressed too hard against their respective prisons. And in the antique mirror, the original crack now gaped wide enough to slip a penny through. From its depths came a sound like wind through a cemetery, and beneath that, something breathing in time with her own panicked gasps. Sleep had become a memory. Emma existed in a haze of exhaustion, jumping at every flicker of movement in reflective surfaces. The antique mirror dominated her bedroom like a silent predator, its crack now wide enough to slip 2 fingers through. Sometimes, in the dead hours of night, she swore she saw something move in that darkness beyond the glass, a suggestion of fingers testing the edges of the fissure. Then came the night of the storm. Rain lashed against the windows as thunder shook the old house. The power flickered, plunging the room into blackness before the backup lamp cast everything in sickly yellow. Emma curled tighter under her blankets, her pulse hammering as the wind howled like a living thing. That's when she heard it, a sound beneath the storm, a knock. Not from the door, from the mirror, sharp, deliberate, 3 precise raps against the glass. Emma sat up slowly, her breath trapped in her lungs. The backup lamp's glow caught the mirror's surface, and for a heartbeat, she saw nothing unusual. Then her reflection sat up too, except it wasn't mimicking her. It was smiling. Emma tried to scream, but her throat locked. The reflection peeled back the covers in perfect sync with her until it wasn't. It kept moving while she froze, swinging its legs over the edge of the bed in the mirror, standing smoothly while Emma remained rigid with terror. The reflection stepped closer to the glass, tilting its head. Its grin stretched too wide, its eyes black pits in the dim light. It raised a hand and pressed its palm against the inside of the mirror. Like a film of water disturbed by touch, the surface rippled outward from its fingers. The reflection leaned in, its face distorting as it pressed against the yielding barrier. The crack in the mirror split wider with an audible snap. The reflection's free hand shot through the glass, fingers grasping the air. Emma recoiled, but some unseen force yanked her forward, dragging her toward the mirror as if gravity itself had shifted. She clawed at the floorboards, nails splintering, but the pull was irresistible. The last thing she saw before her face met the glass was her reflection's triumphant grin, and then cold, impossible darkness swallowed her whole. The room looked like hers, but wrong. The colors were muted, the air thick and stale. When she tried to move, her limbs responded sluggishly, as if swimming through tar. The mirror stood before her, but now it showed her real bedroom, and she was there. Her reflection, wearing her face, smiling. Emma screamed and slammed her hands against the glass, but the sound came out muffled, distant. On the other side, her double tilted its head, watching her struggle with cold amusement. Then it turned away, stretching, sighing, testing its new limbs like a snake savoring fresh skin. It walked to the door. It left. And Emma was alone, trapped in the mirror's world, pounding silently against unyielding glass as her own laughter echoed back at her from the other side. Emma's scream died in her throat as the world inverted. One moment she was clawing at her bedroom floorboards, the next she was through, the mirror's surface closing behind her like a sphincter of cold glass. She landed hard on all fours, her palms slapping against, not wood, but something that felt like polished stone veined with pulsing capillaries. The air here tasted metallic, thick, with the coppery tang of old blood and the ozone crackle of lightning that didn't exist. Emma gagged, her eyes watering as she took in the nightmare version of her bedroom. The walls breathed, actual rising and falling motions beneath wallpaper that had turned the color of jaundiced skin. The ceiling dripped slow, viscous droplets that stretched like taffy before snapping back upward. And the mirror, her only way back, showed her bedroom bathed in warm golden light. too perfect, too inviting. Her reflection stood facing away, running hands through hair that fell in flawless waves no human brush could achieve. As Emma watched helplessly, the thing that wore her face turned, and the wrongness punched the breath from her lungs. It had perfected her. Her cheekbones cut sharper, her lips redder without gloss. Even her posture carried an unnatural elegance, each movement calculated to showcase grace her real body had never possessed. But the eyes were pits, not black, but voids, swirling with faint pinpricks of light like distant stars in a night sky no human should witness. "Don't look so surprised," Not Emma said, her voice a honeyed distortion of Emma's own. "You've been feeding me for weeks." A too long finger tapped the mirror's surface where Emma's palm was pressed. Every glance, every frightened little gasp. Delicious. Emma slammed her fists against the glass. "Let me out!" The reflection laughed, a sound like shattering crystal. "Why would I do that?" It ran hands down its stolen body with obscene pleasure. "I've waited so long to feel sunlight, to taste coffee, to breathe." It inhaled deeply through Emma's nose, then frowned. "Though I'll need to fix these sinuses." Through the mirror, Emma watched in horror as her doppelganger moved about the room with terrifying familiarity, adjusting the framed photos just so, reorganizing the books by color rather than subject. It paused before the closet, clicking its tongue at Emma's wardrobe choices. Then it noticed Emma watching. With slow, deliberate cruelty, it crossed to the bed, her bed, and sank into the mattress with a satisfied sigh. "Don't worry," it purred, picking up Emma's phone. "I'll take good care of your life." Its void eyes flicked up, locking onto hers through the glass. "Better than you did." The notification chime sounded. A text from Emma's mother. "Dinner tomorrow?" "Not." Emma's thumbs flew over the screen. "Can't wait." Emma's scream rattled the mirror's surface as the thing that stole her face settled deeper into her pillows and began scrolling through her messages. Outside, birds sang. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, and in the reflection's warped bedroom, the walls began creeping closer. Days blurred together in the mirror's world. Emma had stopped screaming, mostly. Her voice had long since shredded into something raw and animalistic, her throat burning from hours spent begging, bargaining, shrieking into the uncaring void of this warped reflection of her bedroom. The walls pulsed around her, their surface slick with something warm and organic, the air thick with the iron scent of blood and something sweetly rotten. Time didn't work right here. The light never changed. The hunger never came. But the worst part was watching her life continue without her. Through the mirror's surface, she saw it, the thing wearing her face, live her days in perfect, horrifying imitation. It laughed with her friends over coffee, nodding along to stories it shouldn't have known. It hugged her mother at Sunday dinner, asking about recipes and relatives with flawless recall. It even corrected her co-workers on projects she'd left unfinished. Its version better than hers would have been. It was winning. And then, the reflection made its first mistake. Emma saw it happen in flashes through the glass. A slip of the tongue, a too long stare at a stranger, a moment where it forgot to blink. Tiny cracks in its perfect performance. Her best friend frowned at it over drinks. Her mother hesitated before returning its embrace. Hope, cruel and fragile, flickered in Emma's chest. That's when the whispers started again, but this time they weren't just in her head. The walls spoke. "You see?" They sighed, the voice her own, but layered with something ancient. "It's forgetting. Becoming human means becoming flawed." Emma pressed her hands to the pulsating surface. How do I get out? The room shifted. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and for the first time, Emma saw through, not just to her bedroom, but to the world beyond. The reflection was out there, walking in her skin, but the ties that bound it to the mirror stretched thin and translucent behind it, barely visible. Break the connection, the walls murmured. Emma didn't hesitate. She reached into the glass, through it, and seized those invisible threads. They burned like frozen fire in her grasp, but she held on, pulling with every ounce of strength she had left. Somewhere beyond the mirror, the reflection staggered, clutching its chest as if struck. And then, the world snapped. Emma gasped as she tumbled forward, landing hard on her real bedroom floor. The air was clean, the walls solid, the mirror behind her just glass and wood once more. But the reflection wasn't gone. It crouched in the corner of the room, its form flickering between Emma's face and something far older, its edges blurred like a corrupted photograph. It snarled, the sound not quite human, and lunged, just as Emma grabbed the nearest heavy object and swung. The mirror shattered. The reflection screamed, a sound that started as Emma's voice and spiraled into something inhuman, before dissolving into smoke and static. Silence. Emma stood there, shaking, surrounded by broken glass. Then her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "You okay? You seemed off earlier." She typed back with trembling fingers. "Just tired." And for the first time in weeks, she slept. But that night, as she drifted off, she could have sworn the shards of mirror on her floor twitched. And in the black screen of her turned-off television, something dark and shapeless blinked. The first week back in her own skin felt like wearing a suit tailored for someone else. Emma jumped at reflections in store windows, startled when her phone camera flipped to selfie mode. She threw out every mirror in the house, replaced her phone, even avoided puddles after rain. But the absence of reflections left her with a different kind of unease. She couldn't recognize herself anymore. At first, the changes were subtle. Her coffee tasted wrong until she started taking it black with 3 sugars, a combination she'd always hated. She caught herself humming songs she'd never heard before. The real horror came when she passed a construction site and instinctively knew the foreman's name, a man she'd never met. The nightmares were worse. Every night she dreamed of standing before the unbroken antique mirror, watching her reflection mouth words she couldn't hear. Each morning she woke with sore fingers, her nails cracked and bleeding, as if she'd spent the night clawing at glass. On the 7th day, her mother commented on how much healthier she looked. "You're practically glowing." That's when Emma noticed it in the bathroom mirror she'd missed when purging the house. Her pupils were different. The left one dilated a fraction slower than the right. She leaned closer. Her reflection leaned closer. Then, impossibly, her left pupil contracted on its own. Emma stumbled back, her breath coming in short gasps. The reflection remained calm, watching her with an expression of quiet pity. It raised a hand and pressed its fingers against the glass. From somewhere deep in the house, something knocked 3 times. Emma finally understood. She'd never escaped the mirror at all. The thing that came back wasn't the reflection wearing her skin. It was her wearing the reflection. And the real Emma was still trapped inside the glass, screaming soundlessly as her replacement lived her life better than she ever could. The bathroom mirror fogged over as Emma, or what used to be Emma, exhaled slowly. When the condensation cleared, all the mirrors in the house reflected nothing at all. Outside, birds sang. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and in the shattered remains of the antique mirror, something dark and shapeless began to stir. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.